I would like to welcome all the panelists, starting with Ms. Dakshita Das, ma'am, who is retired IAS, former Additional Secretary Department of Financial Services, with over 35 plus years of experience as a civil service veteran. She is a published author and has represented India in various forums, including the United Nations. We can see her complete profile on the screen. Next up, I would welcome Ms. Nainalal Kidwai, ma'am, who's a chairperson, Rothschild and Co. India, chairperson and founder, India Sanitation Coalition. Ma'am is an author and has retired from her position as executive director on the board of HSBC Asia Pacific and chairman HSBC India. She has received numerous awards, including the Padma Shri. Please give a huge round of applause. I also welcome Mr. K.S. Rao, sir, who is Executive Vice President and Head Investor Education and Development, has 30 plus years of experience in mutual fund industry, is passionate about spreading financial literacy, and he has introduced innovative programs like Nivesh Mahakumbh for her and Fauji Nivesh. Next up, I introduce Dr. Anita Madhok, ma'am, who is Integrative Health and Life Coach, MD Open Spaces Consulting. Dr. Anita, ma'am, is a certified management consultant and master trainer for the Global Professional in in Human Resource Certification. And last but not the least, the moderator of the panel, Ms. Vandana Bhatnagar, who is a strategy expert in skill development and gender, was also a chief program officer at National Skill Development Corporation. She was also the president of the Uditi Foundation, which is aimed at women's economic empowerment in India. Ma'am is also the moderator of this panel, as I mentioned before. So over to ma'am.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. This is truly a privilege for me to be here amidst such a distinguished set of people coming with immense experience, knowledge on this topic. And we can look forward to fantastic insights from very diverse perspectives. And I'm sure it'll give us a lot of food for thought. Not the most appropriate phrasing, I think, before lunch, but nevertheless. But just to give a little bit of context here, when you're talking about, the gender gap, and we're looking at really how financial inclusion can play a role in reducing the gender gap in the country. In India, we've had now over the last many years a lot of discourse, debate, and concern about the very low gender metrics and poor performance of India on these metrics. And that's something which is more in recent years been focused on the economic parameters, especially labor force participation rate. And in that context, if you even just look at the global gender index, India is fairly low down at 126. And within that, if you look at the sub-index on economic empowerment, our performance comes further down to 142. So that really tells us where we are in terms of India's standing on gender with respect to economic empowerment, and more specifically, looking at the financial inclusion aspect. We've seen through multiple studies, initiatives, that financial inclusion can be a critical indicator and a determinant of economic empowerment of women. So under that, I'd just like to spotlight two data points in the last NFHS that was, bringing out many aspects where the gaps are, but looking at two in particular, about half the women in the country only have money that they have a say on how it will be used. And 22.5% of women only are using mobile phones for financial transactions. We heard about, the whole push on digital mobile, but within that itself, we still are about 1/5 only of the women who are using those modalities. A host of factors, socio-cultural, political, policies, infrastructure, skill, education underlie these kind of numbers. And I'm hoping that we can unpack some of these factors through this very distinguished panel that we have with us. I'd like to just begin with Dakshita, and I'm going to be using first names with permission from all these very distinguished people. But Dakshita, I'd like to hear from you. You've been at the intersection of policy for financial sector as well as gender, as the MD of the National Housing Bank, as well as the chair of a recent government committee on gender budgeting. You've done extensive work on that as well. Would be great to hear what in the last few years have been some of the focus areas and shifts that you've seen, especially with respect to financial inclusion for women.
So, first of all, I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad I'm with this illustrious group of people. Well, I'm extremely bullish about the gender inclusion so far as the Indian women is concerned. The government has done some phenomenal scheme rollouts like Jam Trinity, which was spoken about earlier, like the entire movement to ensure that there are operational bank accounts, and like rolling out certain very clever schemes which ensure that there is a financial inclusion which is at an economic level which is hitherto not addressed. In the earlier session, we heard Monica speak about, financial literacy and savings, but that applies to middle class plus. Let's talk of India, which actually exists. And in that India, there are schemes which are doing exponentially well. One of them is the one which Sukanya, which is very popular. And you go anywhere in the lower income class, everybody has a Sukanya for a daughter, which bolsters not only a financial inclusion, but also a sense of having a daughter is not a burden. Recently, this year, the government has rolled out another one where they have that a very simple financial inclusion scheme for lower level workers. You can start with 2,000 rupees, go up to 2 lakh. You get a fixed rate of return over a period of 2 years. Fabulous. We also have data which is coming out about how during COVID times, when the money was transferred into the bank accounts of women, how they turned out to be the principal savers. They actually save because they think of families. They actually think ahead. And I'm largely talking of the lower income groups, and I'm largely talking of rural India when I speak, because we don't need really to have a drive or a push on that above. But yes, there are challenges. One of that, we don't have adequate guidance and awareness as to how to analyze this. So I think that school curriculums need to be redefined. And the other is, of course, the data and the non-availability of data, which we've also suggested in our report, that we need more gender disaggregated data to give a further push into this. But the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to find that there'll be a lot more gender inclusion than we are seeing, say, today, or than we saw in 2014.
Thank you. And, really great to start on a positive note. But just moving on to you, Nena, you've had this amazingly accomplished career as a leader in the financial sector, and especially in your role at HSBC. You also had this strong focus on social responsibility and were associated with several grassroots initiatives. So, would be really great to hear from you a bit, on what you saw from your vantage position as a leader, as well as a kind of a mentor to some of these programs, especially Mandeshi and some of the others. What was working, not working, and what could be some takeaways from there?
So thank you. And let me start by saying I'm absolutely delighted to be in the midst of such a great group, and I'm sure which is one that's going to articulate the issues really well. And Praveenji, always good to have you here, given our association at SEBI as well. So I want to start with a very important movement in the country, the microfinance movement, and why I believe that financial inclusion playing through that channel would be a great way to go. Way back in 2006, where microfinance was actually under a bit of a scanner and it hadn't really taken off, I saw, as you asked, at Mandeshi Bank by a very dynamic founder there, Chetna Gala, an effort where the women were in the process of borrowing money through more formal channels like the Mandeshi Bank, coming away from money lenders. the important input that she was seeking from us at HSBC, which we sponsored, was what she called she called it a management school. And what was that school? It was financial literacy. It was basically teaching illiterate women how to use very basic elements of finance. And more important, and I will link this in my intervention here, to digital access. So a simple woman taking a loan from Mandeshi Bank, then through the use of very simple tools of financial literacy and a mobile phone, now begins to sell her vegetables, not just in the tela where she lived, but she's doing this at prices by using a mobile phone to check the mandis around. And before you know it, she's beginning to actually be a provider of vegetables to surrounding villages. And it came through her understanding of how to make money, and then also how to grow it, and using just that mobile phone in a way that worked. Simple tools, illiterate woman, and look where it took her. I saw the same thing through a petticoat maker. She was a simple tailor making petticoats for her village. And with these very simple tools, the same access to a phone, basic financial literacy, she was then had 20 people working for her, supplying petticoats to surrounding villages. So that journey can happen like magic. So how can we ensure that it happens? And I think the good news is that today, at least the struggle to prove that self-help groups and microfinance works is no longer there. We have a very successful National Rural Livelihood Mission. Nearly 4 lakh self-help group members have been trained as community resource persons. So government very actively looking at women to train women. So, there's Pashu Sakhis, Krishi Sakhis, Bank Sakhis, Bima Sakhis, all of this, big Poshan Sakhis, and all helping in the implementation of the mission on the ground. And this mission has mobilized 87 million women from poor and vulnerable communities into what are 8.1 million self-help groups. Self-help groups being collections of women, 8 to 10 women. So in the same vein, I saw through Seva, who I've been closely working with, and there in Anand district through COVID, and I think that was raised at the last panel, how COVID was a real important game changer. Again, women in this case with newly acquired digital skills were able to share photographs of their products online, create WhatsApp groups, and use Paytm to buy what they needed to make the products and also to sell. So again, this financial inclusion and digital become very close and very good together. So the challenge for us is, on the one hand, we have now collectives of women we can train. That's fantastic in terms of hope. I think the challenge is to provide that a little bit more digital literacy, but even more important, the digital tool of a phone in their hands. There's no point us having internet everywhere without that access. And sadly, the statistics still show that a girl child is less likely to have access to that phone. The boy will have 1.5 times likely to own or have access, forget owning, have access to a phone. And if it's a smartphone, then 1.8 times. So the boy twice as likely to have access than the girl. So we have to work on this. There's no point having internet and training and talking financial literacy and the digital aspects of it without that access. So I'm glad you raised the NFHS survey. It's showing some progress for women in terms of course, bank account, 80%, fantastic. We've certainly seen land ownership improve as well. So women are becoming more important in the household decision. But it's still not where it needs to be. And I think that is where we have to work at making sure that women who manage money really well at home, that they now have a say in the way it is spent. and rather than having to keep hiding it under mattresses and carpets and away from husbands who might otherwise spend it away from the family. So I think I'll just end here to say that I have a lot of hope. We have all the right tools down at the bottom of the pyramid to take this forward. And if we can ensure this digital access, simplify account opening so it isn't looking threatening. In fact, in that Seva example, we began to provide loans to women through banks. But to get the women to go to the banks was not the easiest thing. They felt threatened, they didn't feel they were helped, they were uncomfortable walking into the bank to raise the money that we had lined up for them. Just simple account opening becomes quite a major issue. We need to give them more economic power at every level, and I think really open the training that we provide so that they have comfort dealing with the tools we provide them.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was really very, very useful to have that very detailed perspective. And looking at even the mobile access, I think in recent elections and announcements, several states have also done these kind of schemes of giving mobile phones to women. Unfortunately, we haven't really come across data or analyses looking at the correlation of how provision of these phones has translated into actual usage. But I think it's definitely a trend that we are seeing of women being given more direct transfers and access to mobile devices. But just coming to Rao, I think this is a good point to segue into what some really great initiatives from the private sector have been taking place. We've been seeing in the last World Cup so many advertisements on investor education and safety in the financial space by the regulatory bodies and industry associations. But progressive companies like Aditya Birla have, I think, also taken this forward in a mission mode and hearteningly focused specifically on women as well. So as the head of this programming that is going on at Aditya Birla, it would be really wonderful to hear from you about some of these programming efforts and what have been some of the takeaways from them.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ms. Vandana, for having me here. Thanks, Praveenji, for making me part of this. As you rightly said, it is not with an adventure to be here, but it is a great venture to be here. And it's and far as financial literacy has become a mission, and educating women is most important, because 48% of the population is a woman, and if you are not including them, there is nothing called financial inclusion. And Praveenji, I think one thing I would like to say is the way you included me in the women panel. I mean, if you want to have a woman to be in the financial inclusion, first you educate men that they need to educate women. I think that's the most important part of it. And the another part I would like to say is, we come from this India, the mythologically, if you have to possess goddess Lakshmi, it has to be run through the goddess Saraswati. Root through is goddess Saraswati, and that's the education will make that happen. And the whole inclusion can happen, of course. Goddess Durga who can come and make it happen. It's everyone can become that. And for us, this for her is an initiative which we were looking at a lot of debate what we do next. And over last 10 years, we worked many things in the financial inclusion, including we go to the army camps and we do for the Fauji called Fauji Nivesh, and we adapted some schools because it's a school education is the most important. And the youngsters we work with universities, which is the most of the times is the final year students. We do this workshop called My First Paycheck, and we hardly find people like Sai Kiran, limited number, and we want more Sai Kirans to come to make that happen. And but a lot has changed, and it's things have changed. And far as when we looked at for her, we thought some statistics which you are mentioning today, 80%, 70% of the people are having the bank accounts, but they may not be venturing into other investments. And how we can get there to get back to the investments. And when it comes to the finance, I think Monica was talking earlier, and it's a finance is always personal finance. And for each of us, it's very different. There's a person before the finance. We can't adapt the same thing to everyone. And this is a country with the geography, with the different languages, how you can get there. And we partnered with this is a Canadian partner called the women collectives. She has done amazing work in part of North America and Africa. And we started this for her initiative couple of years back. And whole intention is how we can get that financial quotient for the women to be it to be improved. And then what are the merits we were just looking at? We did a survey and we worked with many of the colleges to start with management colleges, and we did this. Then the outcome of it is we need to get them right, and that's I mean, for us, that HER, her, we thought it could be an acronym kind of it. I mean, I need to do anything as a H is a holistic way, and the E is enablement and empowerment, and R is respect whatever the way it is today. And it's a today when it's a gender gap, we need to acknowledge there is a gap. Then what else I need to start with? Overnight, we can't improvise. And the way we spoke about COVID, and we spoke about JAM Trinity, and that has helped us, to be frank, in the last 2 years. We developed, this is basically for the educated women, the microsite which we developed, and that is helping us to empower them rightly, educate them rightly. It is not exactly a mutual funds, but do it in a holistic way. How you need to open your bank account, to how you need to transact, and what kind of a digital financial literacy you should have, and what you need to avoid, what not to do it. I mean, that's the most important part of it. And the third one, when we went, is we have the financial distribution, and it's a woman educating women will become much more easier. And today, if you look at individual financial distributors in the country, we have little over 136,000 people, of which, if I can go back and do the statistics, there are less than 100 women who work as a mutual fund distributors today. And why should not we get that right and make women financial advisors right? And we worked, I think later part I can cover couple of pilots we did, how we can get that women part of the whole system. And that's, and when we kind of created this content, we thought multiple ways. And when is the can I start this with educating with a girl child first? And at home I can start this education. Then we go to the colleges, and then we have the work institute. For example, we do this my first paycheck as a module. In some of the corporates like TCS, it's an induction module. And when we educate, when we inquire these girls, and this is a differentiation between boys and girls, is when they take a decision, they say, my father decided this money where to put. And that's the question comes. Then how we need to change that mindset. And they have that positivity. All that we need to them do is drive them to the right side. For us, true financial inclusion is create, I think he said very rightly, financial literacy is the first step to start. And then literacy, then you can bring the capability, then that can happen into the broad inclusion.
Thank you so much. And I was just reminded when you were talking about colleges, one of the data points which I found interesting was that access to banking services amongst youth, both boys and girls, the shortfall is almost the same below the age of 18. And then from the time of about 20 onwards, the gap starts getting created to about 7-8% between boys and girls, and that persists across age groups. So there is obviously a conditioning and some kind of signaling that boys and young men are getting, which encourages them to build up their skills, while as I think the girls are not getting that signaling. So that really brings me to you, Anita, in terms of... Sorry.
I'll have one point here. You are very right. I was also looking at some data. When you look at CBSE over last few years, the percentage of girls and boys, the way they score, and most of the times girls score more. 99 plus is a girls, and the boys will fall behind. But when it comes to a later stage of it, when formative stage, you are much ahead, and later part, these boys are dominating. Probably what is that pulling them down? That's where we were debating it. And the second part, we were also looking at, in the last 2 years, things have improved a lot. Today, we have, I think 20% of the mutual fund folios are coming from the women. That way we need to be a little more happier, we look at. And the last 2 years, we look at 1/3, every third investor is coming is a woman. That way financial inclusion, it's happening in a very accelerated phase as far as mutual funds are concerned.
That's really great. And, the point on gender disaggregated data, good to have these data points. But Anita, coming back to this whole signaling and social, norms that tend to create these kind of gaps also.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the external policies and programming that can be affecting these patterns. But looking at where this is coming from, behavioral aspects and conditioning that's coming from in our houses, etc. You've had an extremely extensive experience in the space of working with women across ages and segments. And have been a coach also for women leaders. Would be really useful and great to hear what you've seen in terms of these constructs and what are the observations you've seen on this.
Thanks a lot. But before I begin to state my mind, I want to say thank you to
Yeah.
Praveen Trivedi for having me here.
Yeah.
Obviously, our connection at
Yeah.
IMA has gone beyond just what it was. When I look back, Vandana, the things have changed enormously. From having a mother who didn't know how to even sign a check, and although she was literate and educated, but not empowered to manage a bank account, not empowered to sign a check, to where I am today and where we are, where we see a lot of women today, 20% investing in mutual fund, every third investor coming as a woman. And by the way, a side one is that there's a very nice book I read the other day. It's called Investment is the New Cooking. And that's about how women need to move from cooking and add investment to their portfolios. But in a recent study I conducted in the capacity of being the current chairperson of the Women Empowerment Committee of Indian Society for Training and Development, we did a training need analysis for women. And in the training need analysis, about 300 odd respondents, and mostly they're working women, entrepreneurs, some urban, some semi-urban, some rural sector, but all people who are earning. And even the earning women have said that the topmost training need that they require is financial literacy. It's the topmost. 64% of the women have ranked it as the #1 training need. Having said that, of course, we didn't simply ask for a ranking. We went a little deeper and we came up with some data that said, out of the earning women, I'm not talking about the ones that don't earn, and people of slightly with more means, 54% of them reported that their finances are controlled by someone else, their father, mother, brother. And some of them said there is some advisor, but it's generally father, brother, and husband, these three people. 54% of earning women. And I'm not talking about the ones who are not earning. Now, I have a friend of mine, my age, who is retired recently from a very senior position in a very large organization. She's had a very illustrious career, but on the day of her retirement, she got a lot of her retirement benefits. Her money is managed by her husband. She's a very educated woman. And on the day of her retirement, she doesn't have a penny to her own name. So when I look at that, of course, I look at all the progress we have made, but when I look at such situations, they come to talk to me because I'm a psychologist. I also run a program called Integrative Living, which means we integrate all aspects of our lives to lead a more fulfilling and happy life. And financial wellness is one of the modules in that. I realized that particularly for women, the core decision is financial independence. That's the core decision. And if a woman is financially independent, it gives her a lot of scope to do a lot of things in her life. She's empowered to do whatever she likes. I mean, she can stay out late and she has a nice car to drive her back or whatever. She can make those decisions for herself. If she's financially dependent, or even if she's earning and someone else is controlling the money, it opens the avenue for low self-esteem and low confidence and lack of sense of empowerment and enablement, and potentially also bullying from the male patriarchy in the household, who believe, economic power is more important than any other. So potential begins with a little bit of dominance, then goes to bullying, then it can go on to even more things like violence and actual abuse, verbal or otherwise. So it opens the door to that. So the key starting point for women empowerment to me is financial independence. And if I can take a minute or two more, there are many aspects. Financial literacy, like you said, through Saraswati we get access to Lakshmi, and there's an element of Durga and Shakti also involved here. But I do believe that when we look at people, there are things we need to learn in the head, in the mind. So the skills, the comprehension, the ability to understand numbers, the ability, which is not taught to us, which is really not taught to us. So all the financial literacy programs can work in that direction. The second thing we women need to do is to look at our heart, not just the mind, because very often our own self-limiting beliefs hold us back. So money is evil, or money is greed, or it's not good to talk about money matters, or the men are talking about money matters and stock market movement. How do I make my statement here? And in a way that they will listen to me. Or I may make a statement, but then it gets hijacked by the men in the conversation again. So it's also about the heart. How do I create that welcoming sense of, sense of abundance and a sense of well-being when it comes to money matters, looking at what are the self-limiting beliefs. And I know a lot of women who come and tell me, I really want to have my own bank account, but my husband will not allow me to. Or if I do set up my own bank account, or I do set up my own independent thing, my family will not accept it. So sometimes you have to even take on Ma Shakti and Ma Durga, to fight the rebellion that is required to make that brave move for yourself. To say, look, my money is my money. It's not our money. And this is for the earning people. And I'm not talking about the women who don't earn. So then there is also another deeper aspect of financial literacy. And that is the journey of the soul, the journey of my karma, the journey of my own empowerment, with mindfulness, with positive outlook, with certain grace of God. I do believe, and I'm a believer, that a lot of debt is not good for your soul's journey. So giving free credit just like that may actually push me into less empowered position, and may actually push me into loss of more self-esteem, may actually push me into more loss of confidence, because now I owe so much money. And that could be a step back. So just giving a debt just like that, giving free credit and free loans or low interest loans, or just availability, to me, that may temporarily give me some freedom to spend and manage the money. But in the long run, the ability to return that loan, the ability to use that loan for generating more wealth, and to be able to return that is what will really liberate the soul and take off the burden of debt from the soul. So to me, it's also the journey of the soul that is very important. So that's a bit about my statement from an integrative living and a psychology point of view.
No, thank you. That's really wonderful, and really taken us to another level altogether. And maybe we need to evangelize more Lakshmi and Durga and Shakti rather than Saraswati only. But just coming to you, Dakshita, again, there are all these efforts that are underway from the private sector, as well as we are in a state of flux in terms of disruptors which are driving digitalization, etc. It would be really great to hear from you at this point. What do you see as some of the opportunities from a policy perspective, which could be leveraged or regulatory? Do we need more pushing? You mentioned gender disaggregated data. Do we need a push from regulators to financial institutions to do more tracking and reporting on these metrics? What are these metrics? And also more maybe budgetary allocations. Bank sakhis are not really particularly well paid. So what can we do more?
So first of all, we have to be very clear in this entire discussion which economic class and which income class we are talking about. Where I come from, I'm not speaking about the middle class above. I'm speaking of middle class below. What you do with your money if you're educated, and what you don't do with it if you're educated, is purely your call. If you have money. But if you don't have money, how do you create money, and how do you sustain a family, and how do you invoke independence of financial decision. Inevitably, women have become a very important political vote bank in India. Elections are being run on women, particularly in the rural sector. Therefore, you are finding there is an increased self-awareness, what she spoke about, which has come into play. Women in rural India are also great savers. Now, I'm coming to your question thereafter. And the government has done adequate amounts to ensure that there is a lot of availability, opportunities, or whatever you may say, self-awareness which is coming. However, bulk of these initiatives are off budget. So the government schemes run in two ways. One is where there is through the budget, and one where there are initiatives which are policies to be implemented, say, by banks, by FIs, by other entities. And we are not talking mutual funds and all of that in rural India. We can, of course, we can. In the future, potentially we can. Right now, we are talking simple access and the turning of women into a vote bank, which has leveraged their sense of independence and importance, which has translated itself into greater financial outreach and financial inclusion. Do we have the data for that? No, we don't. There is no single umbrella which tells us that so many women are integrated. You can go to a bank, it will have. You can go to SIDBI, it will have, because SIDBI runs a very nice scheme, collateral-free loan to women below 10 lakhs and, initiatives like that. But do we have a single umbrella entity which can say that this is the impact analysis over the last 10 years initiatives? No, because it becomes off budget. If it were on budget, there would be simple accounting trails and, trails like that which can map. So we come to, therefore, one more problem which we are facing right now, which is whatever inclusion data we are talking about is based on 2011 census. We wait now, very eagerly we await the next census, because that's going to capture a lot as far as the financial inclusion of women is concerned, because the last 13 years has seen that initiative happening. It's off budget. Therefore, sadly, we can't talk about it. And therefore, we need an entity in this country to converge that data.
Thank you. So, I mean, as I hear from you, there is this kind of set of interventions that are possible, and then there are others which are going to be remaining outside the domain that policymakers would engage in. But I think the political impetus that women as a group have right now really needs to be leveraged for this agenda. But Nena, just coming to you a bit again back to the kind of observations you shared. We heard so much about this whole digital push that's taking place. Of course, there are views that the digital gap, which is there for women, could maybe even exacerbate at some point some of the challenges on financial inclusion. But there are others who are far more optimistic. Would love to hear your thoughts a bit on where you see some of the opportunities on this, and if any other levers that you're seeing emerging, which could be looked at to be leveraged going forward.
So just picking up on your digital point, if things stay the way they are in terms of digital access and digital literacy, where women are denied their right at home just from access, of course, the gap is going to widen. So we have to fight this now. We have to enable digital access to women now. And it can only happen through that access being provided at home, yes. But I fear as long as culturally the girl child is the more suppressed at home, because the boy child, who may never go on to use his career, there are enough boys sitting around doing nothing, but we at home culturally still repress the ability of the girl child to grow. And I fear that the tick box exercise of providing money, opening bank accounts, giving mobile phones for free, there's nothing that assures that it goes to be used by those it has to be used by. So the behavioral change can't happen I mean, I've worked in sanitation and water in 5 years, thanks to the Swachh Bharat mission, the huge behavior change of at least awareness of using a toilet. Sadly, not everyone still uses it, but owning a toilet, having a toilet, going to the toilet, the awareness changed. So the behavioral awareness of where women must have that economic independence, such an important point, is not good enough to me to be the funnel of money, which is then getting managed and run by someone else, and I'm deprived in the process. So that it is right for women to have that economic independence is a cultural change. And I think we have to hit at the core of that.
If I can just have a quick follow-up question on that. When we're talking about behavior change also, role models also play a role. And we heard from Anita about how even women who are corporate, professionals, and a lot of us would resonate with that, have not really actively engaged in managing our money. Would you see there being a role for women leaders in professional roles in corporates, being some kind of role models or signaling to their own, environments for women in their organizations to become more engaged on this? Do you think there's a role for that?
I think there's definitely a role, but I really believe in the collective. So whether it's the disempowered rural poor or the earning middle class and up, we have to do this in groups. So I would say every company should have a women's group. Boys are welcome, and we did it through these various women's associations when we were looking at inclusion and diversity. And one of the subjects has to be financial inclusion. So women sit together, they form a group that moves. In the rural area, we found, and through Seva, if one woman stands up and says, I'm going out to work, she gets beaten up by her husband. If all the village women or a large group of village women stand up and saying, we're going to work, there's acceptance. So we have to work in groups because we're looking at this cultural change, and we can encourage it, not just as women. I think as all enlightened leaders in a company, men and women, certainly women should be standing up and speaking more about it, but it is for each one of us. And I think if we can drive women to do it in groups, the cultural change would come. Because if I can say, oh, my 3 friends are doing it, so why not I? And then it begins to multiply.
Thank you. So just taking that point to you, the kind of experience that you were briefly mentioning about using intermediaries. I mean, this is really about that also. You can't necessarily do behavior change by putting a woman with a device, but how do you try and create some kind of intermediation models to try and, address this challenge? And also a bit about the kind of resources that are going into this. Do we look at some more collaboration across different players, say amongst the mutual fund industry or other parts of the BFSI space, to drive this more systematically, this awareness and intermediation?
Yeah, thanks, Vandana, for this question. And today, good part which is happening is coming from the regulator too. In the last 1 year, at mutual funds, we spend part of the money for the financial literacy. It's roughly around 2 basis points of the assets we manage, of which 1 basis point we have an independence to choose. But thanks to the regulator, today 20% of our allocations, we want women participants to be there. Means effectively, I can look at 20% of my budgets to be allocated there. And I'll tell you one pilot. We are in the process. We are just doing it. This is in Maharashtra. There is I find a lot of regional media players, media partners are helping us in a big way, because they come with you. It's a vernacular way. That way you can connect well when it's going to the rural India, especially. In Maharashtra, there is a newspaper called Lokmat. That's very popular beyond Mumbai, and they have one supplement runs called Sakhi Manch. This is a women's forum. And this Sakhi Manch got 4.5 lakh members. And when we deep dived into that, little over 3 lakhs women who are from places like Sangli, Kolhapur, these are the graduate women. And they are today just homemakers. And they intend to work, but there are no opportunities. Then we thought financial intermediation is a better way to educate them when we reach out. Now we are in the process, empowering them to become the financial advisors, mutual fund distributors, and multiple, not only mutual fund distributors, even they can work on any other field. And if we can get them right, I mean, this is the model. If we can adapt, that's possible. And we run with a program called Swabhimani, and how they can get there, and they can work for it. And we also created a program called Sayog, which is like, for example, I have my home house help, and she don't want to take entire salary home because she is aware that more money at home, husband may misuse it, and she want to convert that into savings for the future of the children. And that money, part of it, even at the society level, we decided we will park this money in that on her name. There is an SIP which runs in, and we can contribute to her on our account. And whenever she want accumulated money, she can take. The another way of inclusion. Third one we were looking at, I was working with one of the self-help group. This is in a part of Andhra Pradesh. This is part of Bill Gates Foundation. There are 10,000 women in that, and I could see the energy levels and the way they think about the money is totally different. And sometimes we are again, if somebody says woman is stereotyped on their investments pattern, but we are also sometimes stereotyped on thinking that woman is not aware of it. And today they are much more empowered. And again, thanks to COVID, it has changed the way we look at. And today you can look at the e-commerce place. I was just looking at during COVID time. My wife, she was very fond of these handloom saris, and nowadays she procures a sari from a place which you can't even heard. It's straight from the handlooms. That lady sends it, and it's parceled, and you can see on a video. I mean, that's the way inclusion is truly happening. When it comes, I think we are doing in a bits and pieces. How we can do is, thanks to Praveen, the way he involves himself with Reserve Bank, with the NABARD, and with the SEBI, and with IRDA, all of us can come together. How we can create that integrated platform where we can empower women and get that right. It is sometimes what we decide is in the 42 degrees, but 24 degrees. What happens is in the 42 degrees is very different. If we can get that independent platform, probably I look at NCFE, which is a fantastic platform, and NCFE can come together and we can educate women in a right way, and we can create that financial literacy. And I keep telling, it's a heart of home economy can become active part of Indian economy. And how you can make that happen. And today they contribute. Today statistics says 18% of the GDP is coming from the women. But if we can rightly work out, we were discussing, I have my colleague Lalit Sharma, we were in Banaras Hindu University. One of the professor in economics, he was mentioning, like, if I'm all homemakers, the kind of contribution they do, if we add to that GDP, probably today they are contribute to the 40% of the GDP, which we are not accounting for it.
Very true. Very true. Thank you so much. Anita, I'd like to just come to you again also with the question I raised, Ren, about where do you see, since you worked with a lot of women leaders as well, or what could be possibilities of having role models or other ways to signal a behavior shift, a change in some of the social norms. You've also been chair of the CII IWN network, which is really a large grouping in Maharashtra of women. And some of those platforms also offer such possibilities. So would be really nice to hear what can be done to do these kind of shifts in norms.
They say that there is a special place in heaven for women who help other women. So I think many of us here are eligible for that special place in heaven already. But yes, I do believe that while there is an angle that men have a role to play, definitely. But the problem is also the men are caught up in their own patriarchal mindsets and their own, their own assumptions, which are very difficult for them to break through as much as it is difficult for women to break through. So I do believe that, and something we talk about at IWN, which is Indian Women's Network at CII, something we talk about very frequently, and in many of the women forums that I represent, we talk about the sisterhood of women. When you see, it's men who are in a room, they're equal, men and women. The men always kind of bond with each other, they gang up together, they support each other, even if there's wrong statements being made. But the women don't tend to have that kind of a connectedness, that kind of a networkness. So we believe in sisterhood for women, of women. And I do believe we need to create such kind of networks of women, more and more networks of the women, for the women, by the women, so that we can create a kind of, I won't go so far as to call it a social movement, but let's create a ripple effect at least. Let's at least create a ripple effect. Each one of us do whatever in our own bit. Maybe it's not mainstream activity for us, but in our part time, so that if we see ourselves as a part of our work, whatever work we do, maybe just managing the salary of your house help, the way you just suggested, that I make sure a part of her salary goes into an SIP. So even if that little bit that you have done is a part of the ripple, and it will create a ripple effect of change, because now she and her children and their children, her girl children and her children after that, will look at money much more differently. So you've not only created a difference for her. So the ripple effect is a very important part of the change that we can see for going forward. And the ripples put together can create a tsunami as well. And who knows, it will happen.
Very nice, very nice. I think that's really a lovely way to put it. And also to say, I think there's a place for men also who are supporting women, not just the women in heaven. So, I think we've had this wonderful set of inputs from all of you on what you've seen based on your experience and what you're seeing as some of the opportunities. But just to get, as Praveen had mentioned, I think the aim of this whole gathering is also to try and identify one or two priorities for intervention, for action. So if I can just request each of you to, just share very quickly, what could be that one or two areas, and maybe I could break the order, and then you could just start off there.
So work towards the digital literacy, and I would say the second is the women collectives.
That's I think.
I think we need to distinguish between financial inclusion and financial literacy, and we need to have an income segregated approach for that. And we need a centralized entity to capture all the off-budget initiatives we have happened. At the ground, we need to see where we stand so that we can move ahead.
That's great.
I was really appreciating all the efforts of all the lovely people over here. I only have to say one thing, and that is financial inclusion, financial literacy, financial wellness, financial independence, whatever term you may give to this for women. It's a journey, it's not a destination. Things get better and better every day, and we can see that getting better and better every day. And as long as we are making progress, that's what matters the most.
I think I'll take from where Dakshita ma'am was talking about. Probably there are, if I can segregate people, I mean, if I can create a platform, the first platform is the people whom they are not earning, how they can earn, get them to the part of the system. Probably if I can put it in a term as a 4G, I think whether this is adapting from Chanakya, what he says is, how do you find your income, your source of income, where you're earning, how you can improve the earning for them. The first G is start with working on how they can get their income. And there are people who got an income, but how I can educate them to guard their income, the second G part. And the third part, who got everything up to there, is the financial inclusion, financial capability, and financial security. Then how they can grow their income, the third G. And the last one, probably evolved community here. The G is for fourth G, how you can give your income back to the society. That's the 4G way I can look at.
That's fantastic. I don't think I can do a better job than that to conclude this. But just to, I think, say that it's heartening to hear everybody talk on a more positive note on where we are headed. The trend, I think, is seen to be a positive one. But I think all of you, I think, are saying about the need for a shift taking place at an institutional, at a high level, things like data and formulations which are happening, digital as well, but also shifts taking place in our own homes, what signaling we are doing with our children in schools and colleges. It needs a whole canvas of efforts to drive this agenda forward and accelerate it if we have to catch up on the gap that is already there. But thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure.
Okay, so as we are in the end of this panel, I request Dr. Deepti Trivedi ma'am to present the memento to Ms. Dakshita Das ma'am. Please, ma'am. Now I humbly request Mr. Chintan Khanna sir to please present the memento to Miss Naina Lal Kidwai ma'am. Sir, can we have a photograph? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I now request Mr. Praveen Devedi sir to present the memento to Mr. K.S. Rao sir. Please keep clapping. So next I request Miss Aparna Avasthi ma'am to join us on stage and present the memento to Dr. Anita Madhok ma'am. Thank you so much. Last but not the least, I request Dr. Kirti Narayan ma'am to present the memento to Miss Vandana Bhatnagar ma'am, who was the moderator of this panel.
I was giving you all a standing ovation. Oh, we saw that. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Now we can have a group photograph. I request all the panelists to please stay there on the dais. And I request all the people who gave away the mementos to please also join us on stage. Sir, Chintan sir, please, can we have you on stage? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am.